Yeah, I mean, I think people forget that, like, the Northwest, like Washington in particular, is where indoor growing really started. The first indoor lighting company was in Washington State. The first
Bell
HID.
lighting, right?
I think it was Bell, and there was like Diamond and a couple others, right? I can't remember where all of them were.
Yeah,
But the first importer of like ballasts and stuff, I'm pretty sure was in Washington, and like that was the kind of where indoor growing started because you didn't need air conditioning.
yeah.
Most
It
of
was
it,
like sunlight systems and all that.
yeah,
way back
sunlight
in the
supply.
system.
I mean, the Northwest was kind of
The
where
mecca of
what the
growing.
mecca of indoor growing. Like even if you were from California, there was like you couldn't really get away with outdoor growing in the 90s. I mean, after the 80s, after Operation Green Merchant, growing outdoor was extremely difficult and
Yeah.
nearly impossible to get away with due to camp up until 1996 when they started doing the medical stuff.
Yeah.
And then the counties up there started having remember Mendo, you could do like 20 plants and they wouldn't fuck with you. And
Yeah.
the sheriff said it was cool, but it was only like a few counties. And if you did any more than that, they were coming. And if you had diesel and spill a little bit, they're coming. And it was a whole, you couldn't get
got
power
really
out
rough,
there.
yeah.
It was, you had to really be willing to rough it to be commercial back then. Prior to, I'd say 2008, you had to really put in a lot of work to be a commercial grower and get away with it in California. But there were lots of guys that had places that had 400, 800 amp barns or old agricultural buildings up in Oregon and Washington. It was just hard to find that type of stuff in California. Just the resources you need were hard. That's why everybody was on generators in Humboldt and
Or
everything.
doing all outdoor sun, you know?
Yeah, or outdoor sun, but they'd be under the trees. They'd be tucked in against the stuff. You couldn't just go full open.
In pots tied up in the top of trees.
Crazy stuff.
Yeah.
So, anybody that was really serious about commercial, most of them ended up indoor because you could really expand and you'd end up, somewhere north where you don't have to install lots of air conditioning because, I mean, at least in my memory, people prior to, I'd say 2005 or 6, air conditioning in people's grows was pretty uncommon in most areas.
Yeah.
Other than window bangers.
Yeah.
Just window units hooked up some way. But most people weren't installing central air conditioning systems to cool their grows.
No, even when I set up my first grow with the guys that helped me set up, it was just 2 window bangers in the back of a garage, and then the garage filled with 9 lights, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And that was, no one really was putting up 50 lighters with 20 tons of cooling back then because it was just hard to explain, hard to find somebody to install the equipment, and then also hard to find a location that can handle that amount of power.
Yeah.
And not need fire inspections every year or every other year. And it's like, look, I need more than 18 months to get my money back out of this expensive grow I just built that has to hide from everybody. You can't have the fire department showing up. Hey, we just want to check your sprinklers.
Oh, no, you're right about that. I rented a spot in Canoga Park, and it was just one of those shop businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And I just set up one little tiny room in there with 2 lights just for a test to do some test runs with some friends. And like 2-3 months into it, this dude came banging on the door saying, I need to do an inspection. This fire guy, blah, blah, blah. I walked through all the rooms and stuff. So I told him, come tomorrow or whatever. And that night I cleaned everything out and left.
Yeah.
Didn't go back.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a waste of time and money.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that was common. And so a lot of people, like you're saying, try to find a rural area where you hopefully had a higher power service from some kind of like agriculture business or something that used to be there.
Yeah.
And, maybe can have more than 20 lights. But, I mean, having 100 lights in even up till 2008 when Obama did the Cole memo where he said, as long as you're legal in your state's medical marijuana laws, that we won't prosecute you federally. And that was the first year, 2000, I think 06, 07, maybe one of the guys in our group of like the CW crowd, Cannabis World kind of private forum group, cleared a half acre And everyone's like, "You're fucking crazy, dude. Cleared a half acre and put out his, 500 plants or something."
The people, though, too, going back to California for a second, where you're looking at for the 100 lighters, how they were doing that, though, too, in Cali is like, for say, you're running your set. Now you have your house, and you've rented 6, 7, 8 houses. And you keep putting 20 lights at each house, 30 lights at each house, whatever, with a flip, 15 on this side, 15 on that, or 12 and 12.
Yeah.
And then you have your people living in all those, but they're still under you where they're getting a certain amount of pay.
Yeah.
But that's how Cali was ran, to try to get those bigger sets to grow. But we never had, like what you're saying, not at least in the San Fernando Valley, to where we had warehouses going until after medical came and they're renting them and setting them up, unless
exactly
you were ballsy and setting it up in some place, not that I know of, but
it was rare.
It was rare. Certain ones, if they were there after a while, get busted just due to the high power rating.
Yeah, I mean, over the years, I've found guys that I've met, and they were like, I was running like 100 lighter in like Huntington Beach in 1998. And I met a guy. I was like at a bar in Bellingham. I went to college up there.
Yeah.
I met one of my business partners up there, and we were just like went to a show or something, and we're having a beer and like shooting pool, and we ended up playing against these other dudes there, and the guy had just gotten turned around at the border for getting refused entry to Canada. They were going like on a fishing trip or something, because he had got like busted however many years ago. We were just shooting the shit. And he was a Bubba. He said he was growing Bubba Kush right now, right, and this was probably 2007 or 8, right, and he had said he had gotten busted in like 97 or 98 with like 100 lights, and he showed me his like return, like when you try to get into Canada and they give you the reason why they turned your ass around. He like showed me that, and it was like that he had gotten busted for growing back and he had been. It was like he said it was like 100 lights. And he said it was some shit like that, like fire department or something fucked up happened. I was like, and, almost all the guys I know that made it big back then all ended up getting in trouble. You know, it was just so hard to avoid all of the traps.
Have you heard of Stephanie Landon?
I haven't.
Okay, she's a lady that she's free pot prisoners from jail, blah blah blah.
Okay.
Well, she went to San Francisco and got the mayor's approval to set up a grow there when medical and all that first started. Set up 120 light grow or something there. And then within the first couple of weeks of being there, a month of being there, she got federally raided by the feds there and had to go to federal prison for that, and did 4 years in federal prison over illegal marijuana grow.
Yeah. Exactly.
So we know how California is.
Yeah, for years people that were even within their legal limits. Medically, the feds would still come in, take over the case, and say you're fucked, and put you in federal prison.
Yeah.
And California was bad. I mean, so Washington and Oregon were bad too. I think one of the main differences though is that, like you said earlier, you could find a property up here where people would just leave you alone. People are more standoffish up here.
Yeah.
The neighbors just keep to themselves. Look, if you're not loud and your dog's not barking and shit, you might never meet them in 20 years, right?
For sure, yeah.
And in California, it's just not quite like that, especially not in a populated area. People will keep their ground, but they're watching you through the
blinds.
Exactly. And up here, if you're not bothering them and you're quiet, there's too many trees in between you for anybody to,
Yeah, right there, you never know where you're gonna live, because several times when I rented houses, because I like to move around back then, I moved right across the street from police officers or up the block from a narcotics officer and seen them at their houses, and knew. I was like, wow, this is how just normal they live too in the cities amongst everybody else.
Yeah.
It's not like they go live off in some village,
Exactly. Yeah, no, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.